Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Hardcore Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a good day. Today, we're going to build a mob farm. But first, I'm going to use the 65 levels we got from the last dragon fight to do a quick bit of enchanting, because I have been working with a silk touch pickaxe that doesn't have efficiency and a fortune pickaxe that doesn't have unbreaking, and today I would like to change that. And after enchanting a whole bunch of books, I ended up with a couple of books that had unbreaking. I got an unbreaking 2 book that I can combine with another unbreaking 2, and we have unbreaking 3 on that one there. I don't have an efficiency book at all, and I'm out of levels, unfortunately, for a level 30 enchantment. But what I do have is an efficiency 5 pickaxe that we brought back from the end city. So what I think I might do a little bit later on is get another netherite ingot, combine the 2 pickaxes there, and have an efficiency 5 silk touch, unbreaking 3 and mending pickaxe. That's going to require a little bit more netherite mining to take place, so we're not going to worry about that right now. Instead, I'm going to take the unbreaking 3 book and add that to my fortune pick, and at least that one will be working as intended. So we're going to grind off the flame and the impaling enchantments there, because I don't really need either of those. We're going to use the anvil to combine this unbreaking 2 and that one to make unbreaking 3, and we probably need to do that the other way around for slightly more minimal XP cost. Now we can apply one of these to the bow so that it can have unbreaking 3 on top of the other enchantments that it has. And last of all, we're going to apply unbreaking 3 to this pickaxe. And with that, I'm going to craft a bunch of redstone components, 9 soul campfires, chop a whole bunch of the wood I've been growing here, throw all of that into a shulker box, and it's time to head to the desert. And so here in the desert is where we're going to build our mob farm, or more accurately, we're going to build it 128 blocks in the sky. So at this point, you might be wondering, why come all the way out to a desert to build a mob farm? Why not just build it closer to where you were? And the simple answer to that is zombies. Or perhaps more accurately, a lack of zombies. See, the thing about deserts is they actually have some fairly unique spawning conditions. When the average biome in Minecraft tries to spawn hostile mobs, there's about a 1 in 5 chance that becomes a zombie. It kind of depends on the biome, because some of them are a little bit different, but in deserts in particular, 80% of the zombies the game tries to spawn are going to be husks instead. But something unique about husks is that they will only spawn on the surface. You don't get husks spawning in caves, which means, mechanically speaking, a husk cannot spawn if there is a solid block above its head. Now, to make a mob farm in Minecraft, we're going to be making multiple platforms of solid blocks, creating a lot of dark areas inside this farm, all of which are going to have solid blocks above them, meaning that those 80% of husks the game is going to try and spawn are not going to spawn here, and that means that 80% of the zombie spawning attempts in this area are going to fail. The game is still going to spawn a small amount of zombies, zombie villagers, and potentially baby zombies, but the fact of the matter is we're going to get fewer zombie spawns from this mob farm, which means less rotten flesh. And if you want my opinion, rotten flesh is probably the most useless mob drop in the game. And yes, we can do more interesting stuff with the zombies. We could convert them into drowned, but at this point I'm more interested in just getting the general mob drops from other mobs, like gunpowder from creepers so we can keep making fireworks, and bone meal from skeletons that we can use in automated crop farms. The only good uses of rotten flesh are trading it with clerics, which is about half a stack per emerald if you haven't zombified and cured the cleric, and feeding it to heal a tamed wolf if you like using tamed wolves in Minecraft, which personally I'm not a big fan. So in order to create a mob farm which doesn't give us tons of rotten flesh that we don't really want or need, I'm building this farm in a desert, where building a covered mob farm will result in about 80% less zombie spawns. So the first thing I've done for our farm here is set up a 3x3 of soul campfires over an array of hoppers, which is just feeding out into 3 output chests. Then I built outwards 8 blocks on each side so that we can place a bucket of water on the edge of this platform here, and it flows directly in towards the center of the farm. You could do this with slightly less space if you wanted to, and just put fence gates or signs over here making sure the water didn't flow down into the hole. The important thing is the water does not flow over the top of the hole itself, because that would allow mobs to basically bob up and down in the water streams and they wouldn't end up falling into the fires. We're going to fill out all the way along the side of this with water sources, with the exception of this last block here. And we don't want to have a water source there, because if a water source was on this corner as well, it would combine in the center. That would create a still spot with a water source in the corner here, potentially fill along the rest of this area with water sources as well, and then the entire thing turns into a bath instead of water streams directing the mobs into the center of the farm. Instead, what we're going to do is place 2 blocks either side of this block on the side here, grab 1 more water source and place that there, and that's actually going to redirect the water in towards the middle of the farm, and we can continue doing the same thing along the edges here. Once you've done that on all 4 sides of the farm, you should end up with something that looks like this, a water tray where all of the water is flowing in towards the middle, and that should redirect any items or mobs that end up in this water bath in towards the center of the farm, where the soul campfires are going to cook them. Then before I forget this step, we're going to slab the exterior of the farm here, making sure that these blocks around the edges are spawn-proof, and all of the mob spawning is going to be concentrated on some platforms we're going to build in the center of the farm. Next up, we're going to find the center of the farm. We're going to build up with a couple of scaffolding here, which we can take out later. Make sure there is 3 blocks of height above the center of the farm, just to make sure any mobs coming through in the water streams have enough headroom to get to the center of the farm. And then we're going to build a diamond-shaped platform. We want to have a dispenser directly in the center over that middle soul campfire. Make sure you don't fall in if you're not building this using a Elytra. And then out from that central dispenser, we want to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and that's going to be the maximum distance that the water will travel. Once we've got this plus shape with a dispenser in the center, all we need to do from there is fill this in so it's a diamond shape. And then just to make sure this works, we're going to put a dispenser in the central block here. We're going to place an observer over the top of it. We're going to build up 2 blocks on the side and place an observer facing upwards so that the redstone output of the observer faces downwards. And when I place a block on top of this, it should activate the dispenser once, and the water will flood to all of the edges of the platform with the exception of the one the cobblestone block is currently blocking. If we remove the sand block right there, all of the water retracts back into the dispenser, and that is the flushing mechanism for our platform. Now we have to do this maybe 7 more times. As you build up the platforms above each of these, you are going to be creating some dark spaces within the farm, and you probably want to make sure that there aren't any water buckets in the dispensers quite yet, because every time you place an observer or a dispenser, it's going to trigger the mechanism all the way down to the bottom platform here. So a single torch in the center and torches on each of the 4 edges out the sides there should hopefully guarantee that none of the blocks on each of these platforms are spawnable. Although that's probably only going to be a concern at night, because the rest of the time daylight will prevent any spawns in the area, and you only really need to worry when we start putting a roof on this thing, by which point we should probably have a working mob farm anyway. Now we have 8 platforms here in the sky, almost all of which are lit up. I do just need to quickly glide my way in here and light this one up as well, and then we can actually start thinking about the mechanism that's going to trigger all of these flushing platforms. Up at the top here, we're going to be placing 1 more observer facing downwards, like so that it's going to activate the dispenser here. We do have 1 more dispenser left over, which we can stick back in the redstone box, although that could be the trigger for our mechanism here. We could also, probably what I'm going to do, use a note block instead, because note blocks will actually pulse an observer once if they are activated. They just create a note, and hopefully I can demonstrate this now. If we place the note block on top of here, you'll hear all of the dispensers trigger all the way down the platforms below us. There we go, like so. You hear the tick of all of those dispensers triggering one after the other, with a single pulse that's going to activate the water buckets. In line with the top half of this note block, we're going to start our next platform. This is going to be made out of slabs and is going to be much wider, with the intention of completely darkening the interior of the farm so that every block here has light level 0 and is as spawnable as it gets. Another important aspect of this farm, which I forgot to touch on earlier, is why we're building it up this high in the sky in the first place. Right now we're at Y223, and that's really down to the fact that mobs will only spawn within a 128 block radius of the player, and so in order to get out of spawning range of the surface and any of the surrounding terrain, we're going to be AFKing pretty high up in order to make sure that the only thing spawnable within range of the player is this set of platforms. AFK means away from keyboard, by the way, if you weren't aware of that. I feel like I use these terms all the time without really explaining what I mean by them. AFK basically means that we can step away from the keyboard, we can leave the computer doing what it is doing, and the player is not required to interact with the farm in any way in order for the farm to function. Basically, all of these mobs are going to be killed passively by the farm instead of actively by a player, and that way we can leave it on overnight if we wanted to and gather a whole bunch of mob drops. So now I've got a roof on this thing that stretches out 15 blocks in each direction, with this block here in the center, and that's not quite enough to completely darken the farm, believe it or not, because even though this roof is quite expansive, the skylight is going to leak in from the sides. However, if we look at the skylight on the edge of this block, the maximum it reaches is 7 skylights, so hopefully that should be enough to darken the farm enough for mobs to spawn inside of here once we've removed the torches. The next step is going to be to get the water buckets in, and we're going to be doing that in an alternating pattern, basically so that one platform spawns, one platform is flushed of water, the next platform spawns, the next platform is flushed with water, and so on, all the way up the chain, so that eventually every other platform is spawning mobs while the platform below is being flushed, and we should get a pretty constant stream of mobs going into the campfires. So we're going to glide into this top platform. There we go, landing pretty well. Let's put our first bucket of water in there. We'll skip the next platform and drop down to this one, put a bucket of water in there. Skip the next platform, put another bucket of water in the one below that. Skip that platform, and there we go. All 4 buckets of water are in. Now we can go up and activate the dispenser. Now we come up here, hit this note block once, and that should activate all of the dispensers going down the stack, meaning that we end up with, yes, every other platform currently filled with water. That's exactly what we want. Now we go through and place the remaining water buckets in each of the non-flooded platforms. Taking a brief dip down to this tray in order to get another couple of buckets of water just in case we need them. And with how easy it is to drop from platform to platform like this, you can see why I waited until we had Elytra to do this mob farm. Now we can head all the way back up to the top here, and if we hit the note block one more time, we should find that those platforms alternate, and now the other platforms are all flooded. And they're already spawning mobs. Fantastic. That's taken out all of the torches for us, and we can get in to the scaffolding here, being very careful not to drop ourselves out of the farm. And we can hear the skeletons are already dying in the fires. And as I clear out some of the chests down here, our first mob drops are already coming through. We got some arrows, we got some bones. Absolutely perfect. Just going to clear out all of the torches and whatnot so that each of these chests here is just ready to receive mob drops from now on. We'll break the scaffolding and create a better platform for ourselves down here, the better to access these chests a bit later, and we'll also create a decent storage mechanism once I've been able to acquire some more redstone components. But for right now, a landing platform just lit by a single torch should be enough, and we can access these chests whenever we want to. Now let's get back up to the top of the farm and build ourselves a hopper clock. As you can hear below us, the farm is already spawning a lot of mobs. I'm going to hit the note block one more time and just make sure that all of those are off the platform before we set up the hopper clock. A torch grid up here is preventing spawns because these are top half slabs. You could build the whole thing spawn-proof out of bottom half slabs as well, but I find the hopper clock setup a mite easier if we end up building it this way. And we didn't quite bring enough hoppers for this. Luckily, I brought enough iron and enough wood to make some chests. We need 2 hoppers for this one, and I'll stick 2 more in the redstone box for later. Now, we need to place 2 hoppers facing into each other by breaking 1 hopper and then adding it back into there. I think on each of these we actually need the blocks to be 1 block further out. A comparator is going to be facing out of each hopper on either side, and we want to have a piece of redstone dust on each of these blocks there and there. We're going to be placing a sticky piston facing that way, a sticky piston facing that way, and a redstone block between the 2 of them. We're going to put the redstone block over the top of one of these hoppers, and we're going to place in our 32 spruce slabs. That immediately activates this comparator. The sticky piston pushes the redstone block over, allowing this hopper to drain its items, and waiting for this hopper to fill up before the circuit effectively reverses and the redstone block moves over. This is an etho hopper clock, and we're going to use that to activate our note block here. We can take an output off this clock basically anywhere, but we're going to do it attached to this sticky piston here, because anytime the sticky piston changes state, the observer is going to pulse once, which it will do in a second. There we go, and all we need to do with that is have this activate the note block by running a piece of redstone dust on here and then there. Now, whenever the hopper clock activates and moves that over, it's going to alternate the platforms of water, and we're going to see a bunch of stuff that gets spawned on those platforms below swept off and into the tray of water. Now, the most important thing here is to make sure that you don't fly too close to the farm, because if a skeleton shoots a creeper, they can try and blow up some of this stuff, and if the platform isn't flooded with water at the time, you end up with an exploded platform. But now we should find that a lot of the mobs that are spawning inside of here are leaving drops in the chest, and you will notice just the 1 rotten flesh against a whole bunch of bones, gunpowder, and arrows. We've got 5 rotten flesh in there, a decent amount of string in each of these, and as all the drops flow into this farm, you'll find that there is very little rotten flesh compared to all of the other mob drops we're getting. Now, of course, if you wanted to make this into an XP farm, you could quite easily open this area up, allowing you to swipe at the mobs with a sword, especially if you have sweeping edge on your sword. Usually a good idea, but you've got to be keeping aware of creeper line of sight to make sure you don't get blown up, and a few other things that could potentially cause problems for you here. Personally, I prefer a passive style of mob farm, and I like to get my XP other ways, from villagers, from an enderman farm, from a zombie pigman gold farm, all stuff that we will have a go at setting up later in this series. The last thing we need to do for this farm is to set up an AFK spot above the roof of the farm to make sure that we are 23 blocks away from the farm at all times, because that 23 block threshold is going to be the minimum distance under which mobs will spawn. We talked about the maximum distance earlier, but there is a minimum distance of 23 blocks as well. It would also perhaps be prudent to make sure that the desert underneath the mob farm is also lit up to make sure that we don't end up spawning stuff down here when we return from the farm if we end up dropping down to desert level. So I grabbed a little bit more bamboo. We're going to use some of the string that we've already gathered from the farm to make some more scaffolding, and we're going to build an AFK platform 23 blocks above the roof of the farm. We're also going to make sure the redstone circuit here is not spawnable by placing slabs over the top of it like so, and that should be all good. So now I can put maybe 20 blocks. We should only need 20 because this platform immediately below us is already 3 blocks lower. Let's call it 21 to be on the safe side. We've just got to build that up into the sky like so, stopping when we reach the limit that we've got in our inventory. Place a torch up here, build out on all 4 sides like so, and just build a box around ourselves using a nice straightforward material like cobblestone. We'll also want to keep a bed down here to make sure that we can skip the night before we leave the farm, just in case the desert below is going to be a little dangerous. But for now, we should be able to AFK safely in this farm, and we don't even need to worry about lightning strikes because lightning never strikes in a desert biome. So I'm going to step away from my computer right now. I'm going to leave my mob farm running for about an hour, and at the end of that, we'll see how many mob drops we're left with. Okay, we should have reached the 1 hour mark, and I should be careful of phantoms because I just spent 3 days AFK in game time at least, but now I can still hear the spiders hissing underneath there. The redstone clock still seems to be doing its thing, which means the farm has been working the entire time. Let's take a look at our output chests here and see what we have in terms of mob drops. Very nice. Okay, we've got basically a chest and a half full of mostly gunpowder, bones, string, and arrows. And to be quite honest, I could do without the arrows, but we might be able to use them for stuff a little bit later on, maybe some dispensers full of arrows or something like that. Once again, you will notice that we only have a couple of stacks of rotten flesh in there, and not even full stacks compared to the bones and stuff here. We're getting, I would say, about 80% less. And to be clear, I don't know whether this farm actually produces more mobs as a result. I'm fairly certain the way it works is those zombie spawning attempts fail, but they aren't taken up by any other mob spawns. I'm fairly certain that it's just spawning the same amount of the rest of the mobs that it normally would. It's just that the zombies aren't part of that. And so I'm not building this to make the farm more efficient in terms of the other drops. I'm just making sure that we don't get as much zombie flesh, because I don't really like zombie flesh and I don't want a bunch of it. Instead, from my current perspective, the most important drops in here are going to be the bones and the gunpowder, because the bones, of course, we can turn into some bone meal for bone meal powered crop farms, and the gunpowder is going to make sure that we have TNT and fireworks for the foreseeable future. And I'm going to get down from the farm now because gosh, that place is noisy. But from here on top of my portal by the mesa, it certainly cuts an imposing figure on the skyline, and I think we're going to be making good use of this farm in between episodes to make sure we have all the supplies to do something truly spectacular in this series. But for now, folks, that is going to be it for this episode of the Hardcore Survival Guide. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to leave a like on it for me, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.